Forgot to take off my camera cover. But here I am now. Alright. Let's bring that in a little bit. How's it going? How's it going? 2 viewers is better than no viewers. Hello, everybody. We're going to give it a little while to give people some time to get in before we get started. Not that this is going to be a short stream, but, you know, the whole point is to kind of see the illustration come together from a blank piece of paper to a finished product. So figured, you know, try to give as many people the opportunity to see the blank piece of paper before we get started as I can. Hope everybody's having a good day. The weather here in St. Louis is really nice today. I'm actually kind of disappointed that I'm going to be inside streaming for most of it, but you know what? Laying in the kind of general frame isn't really that big a deal, so let me just go ahead and do that real quick while we, again, kind of wait a little while to try and get some more friends in here. There we go. What do you mean by other characters? Like non-JL8 characters? Yeah, I plan to. I mean, depending on how well this Saturday stream goes, that's probably going to be what I do on Saturdays, is start to finish colored illustrations. I'm not sure if I'll be doing it every Saturday. I mean, if this ends up going gangbusters, I probably will. But maybe like every other Saturday or something. It'll probably be a little while before I get around to non-JL8 characters. I figure I'd probably do one of each of the main cast before we start venturing into non-JL8 character territory. But even then, like, I don't know. I'm not opposed to it, but either A, I would really want to be in the mood to draw the character, or maybe we would do some kind of like channel-based reward thing where people could like vote on the character or something. Alright, we're starting to get a few more people in here. I'll probably end up asking this again when we have a few more viewers. But yeah, Mugen, there he is, waiting to get sculpted. Would you guys be interested in seeing more of like a action-y Clark pose, or more of just kind of a standing, personality-driven Clark pose? And by action, I mean like he'd be flying or something. I kind of thumbnailed out a couple different ideas for what I want to do, and thought I might as well. Trying to pour myself a glass of water here real quick. I'm trying to be very ginger about it, because my Brita filter thing has started to, like, if I try to pour it after I like recently fill it up, it tends to start like leaking everywhere. I don't know if that's a common thing, but it's not really fun to spill a bunch of water on your carpet and then have to stand in wet carpet while you draw. Yeah, I could definitely run a poll. I'm not really sure how to set that up, though. I mean, I'm sure I could find out easily, but probably not the. Yeah, I'll admit the field or beach thing is a little bit more than I intend to do for this. This is kind of just meant to be a single character illustration, not really anything in the way of like a background or whatnot. Although eventually, maybe we'll work our way up to more involved illustrations like that. You know what? I feel like kind of going with the sort of cheekier design that I intended to do. Oh, look at that pole. Well, there you go. Thank you, Ashley. Alright, so literally everyone voted for the personality, so that works because that's what I was kind of looking forward to doing anyway. So we'll do a quick overview of tools and all that kind of stuff, and then I'll start getting into talking about what I'm doing, etc., etc. So this is a sheet of Strathmore 300 Bristol, Vellum surface. The Vellum thing is really just a personal preference. It comes in either Vellum or smooth. Vellum is a little bit toothier than the smooth. Smooth is obviously smooth. I just kind of like the way it feels to work on the Vellum surface. My pencil today, normally I use a Prismacolor Colorase Blue pencil, as seen here, which actually, excuse me, has a blue pencil line. However, that doesn't really play very well with marker. And since we intend to color this piece, I'm going with a traditional graphite pencil. This is a Faber-Castell 9000 something. I don't know. I just kind of picked it up at my local art store, Art Mart, for those of you who live in the St. Louis area. And this is a F grade. Now, for people who might not be familiar, graphite pencils for art come in a variety of grades. Basically, the grade kind of tells you the hardness or the softness of the graphite. The harder it is, the lighter the line is. The softer it is, the darker you can go with it. F is kind of like a midpoint. I think it skews on the harder side. And then if it's like 2H, the H stands for hard. 2B would be like the soft. So it's kind of like a spectrum where it's like 8H all the way to 8B, and it's like 8, 6, 4, 2. It's a little inside baseball. We don't really need to go over all of that right now, but in case you're interested in stuff like that. But yeah, this is traditional art. We're just pencil and piece of paper. We'll obviously get into more tools as we reach that point, but right now this is all we're going to be working with. So when I start, first of all, I've already thumbnailed out, which is to say I've done like a really rough, small drawing of what I want this drawing to look like. Now I'm just very lightly laying in what could be called an underdrawing, where I'm just kind of trying to figure out size and composition, anatomy, all that kind of stuff before committing to anything more permanent. And one of the reasons, I feel like this is pretty self-explanatory. One of the reasons you would draw more lightly at this stage is it's just a lot easier to erase the lighter your line work is, right? So you don't want to go in there carving up the paper and then make a big mistake and realize, oh man, I need to erase that, but it's hard to completely erase it off the page. So I kind of build the figure anatomically. Like this would be like his rib cage. Obviously this is his abdomen, core. You're really kind of just building the character out of rough shapes at this stage, or at least that's the way I like to work. Not everybody operates quite that way. It's a fairly common way to do it. And another thing is sometimes, even though you might not see certain things in the final product, it's not a bad idea to what we call drawing through the character. So like you wouldn't see where Clark's arm attaches to this side of the body, but it kind of helps to draw where it would be so that you make sure that it's in like the right spot, right? So for his arms, they're just kind of cylinders. We'll give him that kind of classic Superman wide heroic stance as best we can, because he's a little guy and his, you know, Clark's legs aren't the longest. And one of the other things I kind of like to describe this as like feeling things out. As you can probably see, I work pretty sketchy, pretty rough. And it's almost kind of like you're squinting at the illustration, like everything's sort of foggy and blurry. And then the longer you work at it, the more things start to sharpen up and come into focus. So I'm relatively happy with that body. So I'm going to start laying in facial features, and then probably quickly realize that the body is maybe like too big or something. I like to start with the nose because it's a nice central landmark that you can then sort of like build the face out from. So I'm starting to get a pretty decent sense of Clark's head. And I'm already starting to feel like maybe the body's not quite matching up. To said head. So I may need to be redrawing most of the body. But that's okay. That's just what happens sometimes. It's not ideal. I'm not gonna be like, oh yeah, whatever. But sometimes get far along in a drawing. Although, honestly, this is not that far along. And you kind of just realize that, you know what? I think I could do that better. So you erase and you give it another shot. So here we're going to kind of pull Clark's cranium back a little bit. Because, yeah, like, his neck should not be over here. It should be, like, over here. So we're just going to come in here with an eraser. But again, this actually happened, I don't remember when it happened, but, where I had to, like, erase a lot. But, it's a lot more palatable to erase something because you just need to kind of, like, scoot it over some than constantly erasing something because you just can't figure out the way that it should look. And what I mean by that is, like, I was pretty happy with that body. You know, like, I felt like the anatomy was good, all that kind of stuff. It was just not quite in the right place, which is a lot easier and more palatable to erase and redraw than, like, a hand that you just can't quite get looking right over and over and over again. I'm not sure if that entirely makes sense. I mean, I know it makes sense. I'm not sure if I'm conveying it all that well for you guys to be able to understand what I'm talking about, but and again, I mean that's my own personal opinion, you know. Um, there are probably other artists out there who are like, no way, I would much rather be constantly erasing because I just can't figure something out than have to erase and redraw something because of such a minor silly thing, like, oh no, it needs to be shifted like a half inch to the right. Speaking of erasing and redrawing because you can't get something right, now I'm kind of second guessing how I want to do this right arm of his. Also, this is what we call a center line to kind of just let you know in space, like where the center of the body is. Because, you know, a lot of your body is theoretically symmetrical. You know, it's kind of like a mirror image on either side. So having a center line helps you make sure that, you know, things are being split evenly down the middle, looking the right on either side, etc., etc. I think this is one of those instances I just need to draw the hand kind of like where I think I want it and how I want it to look. And then you basically just essentially connect the dots. Because like I know that from the wrist is a forearm, and that forearm connects to the elbow. Oh, and before I forget, not that I'm running out of time, I actually did put the warm-up drawings from this week up in my big cartel store. So if you had any interest in any of the warm-up drawings I did this week, I did a Green Lantern, I did a Wonder Woman, I did a Flash, I did a Superman, I did a Batman. All of those are now available for purchase in my online store, yalestewart.com/bigcartel. Or you could just, in the chat, type !store, and that command should provide you with a link directly to said online store. So yeah, if you saw me draw one of those warm-up sketches and thought it'd be cool to own it, or if you just like one of the characters and would like a relatively affordable option to own a piece of original art from me of that character, probably want to check that out. Because the warm-up sketches are probably going to be the most budget-friendly piece of original art from me. I'll go up here and start working on Clark's hair, starting with his hairline. It's kind of wild how impactful the S curl is. Like, he doesn't really start to feel like Clark until you drop that S curl in there. I think those eyes might be a little too big. Not wildly so, but... rein them in just a smidge. What we do is kind of like pompadour curl. Now on the flip side, I think his hair is looking a little too, not quite big enough. So we're going to pull that out a little bit further. Alright, we're definitely starting to get there. With the pencils, anyway. So we're gonna put in his little bow tie, as it were. As I've mentioned before, like the JL8 characters are not super ripped, because they're 8 years old. And yes, I know I've seen the like little Hercules, where it's like an 8-year-old kid who looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger or whatever. But I do like to give them a little bit of musculature, just to kind of add some volume to their figure. It just kind of helps them look a little bit more three-dimensional than they might look otherwise. Especially because my coloring style is pretty flat. You know, there's not really a whole lot of volume being added in the colors. But yeah, as you can kind of see, that sort of like once fuzzy, sort of out of focus looking drawing is now starting to sharpen up into a more recognizable finished piece, as it were. Still got a long way to go, but at least in the pencil stage, you know, we're starting to kind of reach the finish line. And also, I mean, you know, I tend to pencil a little bit tighter than I probably need to, especially for someone who inks and colors their own work. There are definitely people who pencil a lot looser than I do. Like, they would be totally fine just like sending this off or starting to ink from this part, but I'm just not quite that confident. And that really is kind of like what it boils down to, is just sort of a degree of confidence in your ability to accurately translate what you're going for in the inks. Um, and I just worry that I wouldn't be able to do that quite as well without more defined guidance in the pencils, which is why I pencil fairly tightly before I start inking. This is actually an F pencil, so kind of like one notch, I guess, towards the harder side. I'm actually not as familiar as I used to be with the graphite scale. Um, I actually just started buying graphite pencils again for this very specific purpose. These Copic colored illustrations. And I literally just kind of went to my local art supply store and started fooling around with pencils. I grabbed what did I grab? I grabbed about 3 or 4 different kinds. I grabbed a 4H, a 2H, and an F. Oh, actually, I also grabbed a 5H, 3H, and an H. And the F is the one that I felt kind of both felt right and also showed up well on camera. I hope that answers the question. Also, honestly, I think this is the first time I'd ever heard of an F. In all my time, like at art school and stuff. Crazy Platinum, thank you so much for the follow. I hope that means that I did, in fact, answer that question for you. But yeah, in all my time at art school and stuff, you know, I remember the scale of H and B, but I kind of thought that like the only non-numbered one was the HB. I mean, no part of me thinks that like, oh, they've developed a new category in the time since I've graduated. I think I'm just not quite remembering correctly. But yeah, I mean, it's a nice little pencil, especially for doing kind of like underdrawing type stuff. You can get some pretty decent values out of it. And it stays fairly sharp, which is also kind of like one of the trade-offs. H pencils, they're a lighter pencil because they're harder, but because they're harder, they tend to retain their sharpness longer, whereas a B category pencil, you're like constantly having to resharpen that thing because it's just so soft. Gotta do a cool cape shape, or attempt a cool cape shape. I don't know if this actually looks all that cool or not, but you get it. I'll go in here and add his S shield. Got to remember to kind of contour it around his body a little bit because he's got his chest puffed out. And the way I like to do the S shield, I'll put the diamond in there first, then I'll kind of do the I don't really know what you'd call it. It's not really like a border. It's almost like a gutter. I mean, if you're familiar with Superman's symbol, then you know what I'm talking about. I'm not really going to worry too much about this part. I've drawn the S shield enough times where I can kind of ballpark it. But then, basically, then I start laying in the S. And this is kind of one of my regrets, is giving Clark his classic S on his costume instead of like a lowercase thing. Yeah, let's do that. Let's have the cape, excuse me, have the cape come in front of his one leg. Kind of adds a nice little sense of depth. And just so I don't forget, we're going to go ahead and erase that part. Oh yeah, we all know it. That's just what I should have. That's what I should have put on his shirt. I should have just given him the elementary school desk S. I like how I totally drew that off camera. Way to go, Yale. Alright, so Clark's like goofily optimistic, and as such, I think that he would be inclined to have a goofily optimistic expression while giving a thumbs up. And actually, because he's kind of smiling all cheeky, you sort of want to squash and stretch his nose a little bit. Because when you smile, your nose does actually squish a smidge as the skin on your face kind of like stretches and contracts. And this is like one of those things where it's kind of a doofy face, but I think Clark would think that this is really cool. Uh, and that's one of the things that you need to try to think about is like, what does your character think about this thing that they're doing? Does it suit their personality? Is it out of character for them? If it is out of character for them, why are they doing it? I mean, that's why all the stuff I ever do of Bruce smiling seems to go over so well, because Batman smiling isn't the most common thing in the world, and people find it really funny because it's, out of character for him to do that. Or just for him to look silly, period. Batman is a character that kind of, his appearance is very important to his whole shtick. Um, so he's not really one to make himself look dumb intentionally. So when he does look dumb, people are like, oh, ho, 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 ho. All right, and here I'm just kind of loosely roughing in where I want some highlights in Clark's hair to be. I don't always put highlights in Clark's hair, um, but especially since we're coloring this with Copics and everything, I think it'll look better to have his hair not just be a flat black shape. And honestly, I think that this pretty much does it for the pencils. And in fact, kind of like what I was saying earlier, this might even be kind of not overkill, but probably more than I really needed to do. With the pencil stage. Urbo, thank you so much. Both for the follow and for the comment. I really appreciate that. Gabriel, I do prefer penciling with the blue pencil. I mean, not by like a wide margin or anything. And honestly, the reason I like using the blue pencil really it boils down to, and since I did the finish the pencils, I'll take a second to kind of look through chat and answer some questions for a couple minutes. Um, oh, we did that in under an hour. Cool. The reason I prefer the blue pencil is, for me personally, um, the blue doesn't tire my eye out as much. And what I mean by that is also let me pull this down here a little bit. Um, when you're working for a long time, the value of a gray pencil, it all kind of starts to blend together a little bit. Um, Personally, I feel like the blue just kind of keeps things visually interesting for me more than the gray does, which is why I prefer to use the blue pencil. Um, but like I said, the reason I'm using the graphite here is because graphite, first off, is easier to erase, and since we're going to be coloring this with Copics, you don't really want a whole lot of the underdrawing to be showing. Usually, I don't erase my pencil stuff because pretty much all my coloring I do digitally. So I'm able to just kind of erase it, honestly, more effectively in Photoshop by adjusting the levels and everything like that. But it's a good question. Thank you for asking. Anybody else have any other questions real quick before we start getting into the ink stage? No worries if not. I just know that, while I'm working, I'm not awesome at keeping on top of chat. TH Civ, thank you so much for the follow. I'm just kind of hanging out here, getting my brush ready. Oh, I guess I should go over my inking tools now that we're about to. Dr. Banana, I think that he is just upstairs napping. So what I'm going to primarily use to ink this is my Winsor & Newton Series 7 number 2 brush, Sable hair. This is a pretty industry standard. A lot of inkers who do ink by brush, this is pretty much the brush that they use. The numbering really just boils down to like the size of the actual brush itself. The smaller the number, the smaller the brush, the bigger the number, the bigger the brush. I actually do have a number 5 to kind of show you as an example. There you go. So this is the 2, this is the 5. Obviously you can see it's quite a bit bigger, both in terms of thickness and in length. Paulo Rivera really believes that the bigger brush is better because he thinks that the more bristles act kind of like as a shock absorber, so it kind of smooths your line out in that way. I haven't really worked enough with the number 5 to be able to tell if that's accurate or not. I'm just really comfortable with the 2, so that's kind of what I stick to. But I wouldn't mind getting more proficient with different size of brushes going forward. So yeah, like I said, this is a Winsor & Newton Series 7 number 2. Before I start working, I like to dip it in water because the bristles are essentially thirsty. So if you load them up with water, when you go to dip it in the ink, the ink flows off the brush more smoothly. If you kind of just if you go in dry, the brush itself absorbs most of the ink you just dipped it in, and you're gonna have to just keep re-dipping it over and over until eventually it starts soaking up enough to where it's, you know, like bleeding out all the excess ink. So to circumvent that, like I said, we just dip it in some water. And then we move on to ink. Excuse me. And the ink I use is a Speedball Super Black India. I kind of hop around on inks. For a long time, I was using Higgins Black Magic, I want to say. This is the Speedball that I'm talking about. And a lot of times with ink, you kind of need to just toy around with it until you get it the way you like it. Sometimes you need to add a little bit of water because maybe it's a little too thick. Sometimes you need to let it sit out with the cap off for like a day or two to thicken it up because it's too thin, etc., etc. I've yet to find any ink that I'm just like, that's my ink. I buy it, I open it, it's exactly the way I want it to go. Ta-da. And truthfully, I don't know anyone who has. Pretty much everyone I know who inks their own work or is an inker, they'll tell you the same thing. You kind of just need to, you know, it's kind of alchemy. You got to kind of fiddle around with it a little bit until you find it. Get it the way that you want it. But Higgins Black Magic and Speedball Super Black are the two that I found that require the least fiddling. So those are the ones that I tend to buy. If that makes any sense. Now, before we get started on inking, I'm just trying to decide what I want to listen to next. Because the album that I was listening to is now over. And frankly, I really enjoy listening to music while I work. I'll try not to take too long. And you know, because it's Clark, you know, I try to find stuff that sort of fits the mood of what I'm working on. So given what we're working on now, I'm looking for something, trying to decide on something maybe a little bit more poppy, a little bit more fun, a little bit more lighthearted. Oh, you know what? Let's go with some Matt and Kim. Take it back to my college days and listen to Grand. Alright, so now I'm dipping my brush in the ink. I'll come over here to a kind of scrap piece of paper to sharpen my brush tip on it. Get rid of a little bit of the excess ink. And usually I like my first line to be a kind of big straight one. There we go. I'll hit this outer part of the cape. Another thing that I generally like to do when I ink, and this is literally just a personal preference, I kind of like to work forward back. So like the most foreground element. Granted, I would have probably started like with the hand or something, but I like to do things that overlap and then the things that are underneath them. And like I said, that's just a personal preference thing. I actually literally asked some fellow artists if they also do that literally just like a week or two ago, and they were like, no, I don't do that. And by fellow artists, I mean like I asked like Klaus Janson, so you know that dude knows what he's doing when it comes to ink. So if he feels like it's totally fine to not to not operate that way, I think he knows what he's talking about. Oh, Gabriel, that's really cool to hear that you're putting up the Schwartz Elementary print. I'll admit that's one of my favorite prints. I'm particularly partial to that one. Now, hands can be tricky, which is also why I generally don't start with them. I kind of like to get a feel for what my brush is doing first. Because when you work with analog tools, there can be days where they just don't quite work the way that you want them to, and you kind of need to make adjustments in your approach to make sure that you're getting what you want from it. Also, forgive me if I'm getting in the way of the camera. When I ink, I tend to like to get pretty in there. It is something I'm trying to work on. Another thing about brush inking is that it takes practice, but you end up kind of just getting a feel for where the tip is, like where the tip of the brush is. You're not really like actually looking at the end of the brush. You're kind of just looking at where you're working and trusting that the brush is going to go where you want it to. And I know that maybe sounds a little witchcrafty or something, but it's really not that weird. Like, and it happens pretty naturally. Because I didn't try to like practice to get to that point. It just kind of naturally happened. There we go. Let's get some black in this illustration. Oh, wow, Gabriel, that's really cool. I am more than just a pair of hands. I'm a pair of hands and a nose. I retired from the Smash Brothers franchise to pursue a career in comics. I also mention this a lot, but I apologize if my breathing gets kind of weird while I ink. Also, there's a lot of kind of like breath holding that goes on. And again, I don't know if that... I know it's not literally just me. I'm not sure if how common or uncommon that really is. But you know, it's kind of like lining up your shot. You just sort of hold your breath until you feel steady and then send it. There we go. And if you've heard me talk about this before, I apologize, but it's one of those things. I can kind of start to tell when my brush is sort of running low on ink. So basically, the bigger a line is, the more ink it requires. So when I can tell that my brush is getting a little low, but not totally dry, I'll start to kind of like look around for smaller lines that I might be able to tackle with the amount of ink I have remaining. Which is why I kind of just did those little sort of tick marks. And in the amount of time it took me to explain that, I feel like the little ink I had remaining probably just dried up on the brush. So I'm just going to go ahead and clean my brush and start back over. redip it, all that. Oh man, I just realized, Dr. Bananas, you are my 400th follower. I wish it was 400 subscribers. You are my 400th follower. Thank you so much. That's really cool. So caught up in inking that I completely missed that milestone. Alright, I think next I'm going to tackle... There we go. It was kind of a happy accident. As I was eating lunch today, I saw that cartoonist Kayfabe uploaded a video about the Superman versus Muhammad Ali comic by Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil. So I was watching that while I was eating lunch. Kind of nice way to sort of get in the mood. And also, if any of you are not familiar with Cartoonist Kayfabe, it's a YouTube channel and podcast hosted by Ed Piskor, who did X-Men Grand Design and Hip Hop Family Tree, and Jim Rugg, creator of Street Angel. And it's awesome. I really love that channel. They make really great content. You know, a lot of comic content on YouTube is just very much kind of just like hacky fanboy nonsense. Like, oh, who would win in a fight, Thor or Hulk? And that's fine, you know, like there's a place for that. But if you're more just a fan of comics as an art form and want to hear people talk about comics as an art form intelligently, you should really check their channel out. And they're across the board. You know, like they do a bunch of indie stuff, they do big two stuff, they talk about foreign stuff, you know, like they really are just into comics, period, you know. I will say that they're not necessarily an all ages channel. Not that they do anything particularly raunchy, but you know they do use adult language sometimes. So if that's something you're concerned about, maybe like sharing it with your kids and stuff, do be wary of that. But other than that, I'll do this other. And then because Clark's chin kind of overlaps his cape, I'm going to go ahead and knock that out. There we go. Ink in his neck. Into his other hand. A lot easier than the other hand since it's pretty much just tucked behind his body. There we go. And in the drop shadow. I'll just go ahead and fill that with my brush. There we go. Almost there. I think I can... yeah, that's a little bit thicker than I was looking for, but it's not terrible. That being said, I think I can probably... yeah, there we go. In fact... all right. Need to reload my brush one more time. And let's go ahead and finish his foot before we get into his... get into his face and stuff. There we go. Feeling kind of bold, so I'm just going to go ahead and... there we go. That didn't go too bad. That line is probably pretty wet now, though, so I'm going to try to avoid that. So let's go up here and take a crack at his other ear. Go ahead and ink that back part of his hair. That was not the best, but whatever, sometimes that happens. Go ahead and do his hairline. It's kind of a good idea to kind of feather it a little bit. Otherwise it can look a little bit like a helmet. The hairline, that is. I think I've got enough juice left to hit his little smile. I think I can even tackle the nose, or at least part of it. No, I think I can get the whole thing. There we go. Do his cheeks. Well, the raised bits. You guys know what I'm talking about. I think I probably need to reload the brush again. Yeah, Urbos, that really just boils down to making sure that you're not overloading the brush. I could definitely have it to where the ink doesn't dry this quickly. It's just kind of a matter of getting a feel for it. Like usually, I'm not sure if you can see this all that well. I've only dipped the brush to like about here instead of, you know, like way down here or something. But I can totally understand how being a lefty would leave you with some trust issues regarding ink and dryness and all that stuff.
Then we'll do a little bit of feathering here just to kind of give the hair a little bit of texture. There we go. We'll go up here. There we are. That's not quite as good as I was hoping, but we'll survive. Alright, real quick, I think I'm going to do his belt buckle, which, since it's kind of like a metal or plastic, I tend to just use a Copic Tech pen for that. Alright, pretty much all that's left is the face. So let me go ahead and tackle that. Making pretty good time on this. Inks are only taking about around like 40 minutes or something. That's not too bad.
go.
I love inking eyebrows. I don't honestly know why. I just find it fun. Probably because they're just so expressive. You know, I like a lot of emotion is contained in your eyebrows. Now for this big old piece of the cape. Gotta do his belt.
All right, and that pretty much ends the brushwork. Just, oh, no it doesn't.
Almost forgot.
Sid, how long does it take for me to knock out a commission process between receiving the commission and actually getting it done?
It really depends on my workload.
Right now I'm pretty behind on commissions, so I've got people who are waiting, who've been waiting since September to receive theirs. So if I were to take on like a fresh commission right now, I'd say it would probably be 2 to 3 months. Truthfully, possibly even longer, just because what with the holiday season and everything, it kind of screws with my work schedule a little bit. Gabriel, that's really cool to hear. Oh, I didn't know that Francis Manipool did tutorials on YouTube. That's awesome. I should check those out. I love his work. Alright, so now I'm done with the brush stuff. Now it's just a matter of finishing this off with finishing off the inking phase, that is, with a combination of tuck pens, and markers. So first is going to be inking Clark's pupil. And Civ also, it kind of also depends on where it's going, the commission. That timeline is for a domestic commission staying within the U.S. Obviously, it takes longer just for shipping if it's going internationally. And last but not least, the S shield. There we go. So now all that's left is to fill in the black areas, which is also going to be using a Copic. This is a Copic 110 Special Black. I don't really know what makes it different from the 100 normal black, but that's pretty dry. Let's try this one. That's better. But I like my blacks to be as black as possible, so I was like, well, let's go with the special black. For all I know, it's just a placebo effect thing, but, you know, they cost the same. So it's not like I'm wasting a bunch of money. All right. There we have the finished inks. Good to see you, Mark. Thanks for stopping by, buddy. It is going well today. How are you doing? And now we're going to use a kneaded eraser. To get rid of all the pencil lines. I tend to prefer the white eraser, but that eraser is pretty extreme and it doesn't really play all that well with ink. It's great for erasing pencil, but it also kind of pulls up the ink too. So I tend to reserve that just for when I'm trying to make corrections to the pencils. Alright, and there we have it. Next up is going to be colors. Oh, actually I guess I gotta... there we go. That's fine. Oh yeah, you running any raids or anything? You're just kind of screwing around? Alright, so now while I'm kind of switching gears into coloring mode, if anybody has any questions or comments to ask, now's a great time. Just gonna grab myself a fresh glass of water, kind of stretch a little bit. But if not, that's totally fine. I can just get right into it. That's also completely acceptable. I think I did kind of miss a little spot right here. There we go. Looking good, looking good. Alright, you know what? Let's just get into it. So for markers, I'm not going to go through each individual marker, but I am using traditional Copic markers, which are dual tipped. As you can see, one end is kind of like a chisel tip. The other is like a fine point. They're just alcohol-based colored markers. Again, kind of like an industry standard type thing. But I will also admit, I'm really not all that familiar with using them. I'm pretty, like, this is literally the third time I'm using them to actually color something. So, you know, we're learning together. But let's just get right to it, right? One of the reasons I'm kind of doing this circular pattern is because Copics do dry pretty quickly, and they can get kind of streaky. So working in kind of little spiral motions helps to sort of offset that. And Copics are transparent, so you can actually kind of like layer them. And you know, I'm sure there are people who are awesome at that. Like I said, I'm still kind of getting the hang of this stuff, but and we're just going to be coloring Clark in what's known as local color. So basically just the colors that he would be under daylight, white light, etc. Because, you know, if you were in a room with like a reddish light source, that would turn his blues into kind of purples. Depending on the shade of the red, his reds might stay their traditional red, or they might get darker red, etc., etc. How do I like Copics compared to other markers I've used? Honestly, I haven't really. The only other markers I've ever used were like Crayola Magic markers, and these are pretty significantly better than that. But yeah, to start, we're basically just laying in a flat foundation for the color that we're then going to go over with darker shades to start adding, well, shading, rendering, etc. Let's get in there with the fine point. And there's a very real chance I'm actually going to give this a second coat to kind of smooth it out. I'm not sure if it's showing up on camera, but the color as it stands is not, I wouldn't go so far as to call it splotchy, but it is a little bit uneven. And, you know, so, there is some charm to that. But I think I'd like it to be a little bit more flat. Also, even though the ink I work with is waterproof, I'm trying to kind of color around the actual ink because it can smear a little bit. Nothing crazy, but you probably can't see it on camera, but it's kind of doing it right there. And by smear, it just kind of makes it look a little blurry. Like I said, it's really not that bad, but just something to be mindful of. And, you know, I mean, like, there's going to be some unevenness to this period just because that's just how real media works, you know, as opposed to Photoshop where it's all just pixels and it just feels like a totally flat color. So I'm not too worried about that, but, you know, you don't want it to be, like, too obtrusive. Actually, you can really tell. Man, you can, like, really build up this blue. Alright, so there we go. That's the blues taken care of. Base layer, that is. So we're just going to kind of go in and lay in all the base layers first before we start getting into fancy, you know, like rendering and whatnot. Truthfully, I'm not 100% sure if this is the red that I really want to be using on. I mean, it's the only one that I bought when I was at the store. But this might be a smidge darker than the red I would prefer to be using. Not that I even know like which marker that would be, but next time I go to the store, I might try to find a different one that feels a little bit more appropriate. And you can kind of see like the red did a pretty good job of covering that entire thing. That color seems pretty flat. I'm going to use the fine tip to color in the top part of his boot, because I don't really want to go over those lines with the marker. There we go. Guess I might as well hit the S shield too. Oh yeah, the paper is bowing a little bit. Getting a little wavy. Not that there's anything wrong with that, it's just something to be mindful of. And I mean, that happens when you work with particularly wet media on paper, whether it's markers or ink wash or whatever, which is why watercolor board is like thick. It's not really, I mean, it is paper, it is technically paper, but it's super duper thick so as to prevent the paper from just looking like a wave pool. There we go. Yeah, this is a bit more of like a deeper muted red than I think I was really looking for. I mean, it looks fine. But I tend to have the J-Lake characters colored more in vibrant, brighter hues. Excuse me. Certainly brighter than Brandon Routh's Superman Returns red. It's practically brown. God forbid Superman be a colorful character. There we go.
Even though this will probably end up being a completely different shade of red, I'm still just going to fill the interior of the cape in with the base red. Also, I'm not sure if I've said it yet today, but thank you so much to everyone who's come out so far. I really appreciate it. It's always nice to know that there are people who are interested in what I do. Elfin Arts, thank you so much for the follow. I can use the chisel tip over here. So I think the way that we're going to end up handling this is that the light source is going to be coming from over here. We'll do yellow next. Not that there's a whole lot of it, but... There we go. And now, the base coat of his skin tone. mentioned this last time. Maybe I should kind of fool around with doing the white highlights like they do in a lot of manga illustration. I think that could look kind of cool. Obviously, it's a little late to try that here, but future reference. There we go. I actually had to go grab a marker that I thought I had in my stash, but did not. Just a super dark blue for the highlight, as it were, on Clark's hair. Alright, there we go. So I think first I'm going to lay in the darker shade of flesh tone.
There we go. Next up, I think we'll do the blue. There we go. Almost done with the blues now. Or this layer of blue anyway. I think that I might go a little bit darker in certain spots with a slightly darker shade. I think I might actually go over this right here. Try and punch it up a little bit. No, do not use a Fiverr account. I appreciate the compliment, but no, Fiverr is actively destroying the art community. Like, it's just like race to the bottom. I mean, it's entirely possible that like they've changed some over the years, and like maybe they're not operating quite the way I think that they are, but I'm actually going to try and hit this one more time to give it a little bit more body, because then while it's juxtaposed to this like darker blue, it doesn't quite read as dark as I would like it to. Yeah, I mean, like, I'm not trying to be like a downer or something. It's just the idea that people are literally doing like professional grade art for like $5, you know, making like logos and stuff for people. Your work is more valuable than that.
I just consider fiber very exploitative. I don't think I know a single other working professional who doesn't feel the same way. Alright, so as you can see, we're getting into the rendering out in the reds. Already tackled the yellow. There we go. There we go. There we go. Put some shadow on the S shield because it's covered by the kind of like bow tie thing. Excuse me. Let's go ahead and darken up this because it's obviously behind. And I think we'll do from here. There we go. This back here is definitely going to be the darkest red. But like I did before, I'm going to lay this one in there first before hitting it with the darker / darkest shade. This isn't super easy to see, but I think that's fine. I think it actually works better that it's kind of subtle. I do think I'll make this darker. Honestly, you know what? I'm kind of feeling like Clark's skin is not looking quite as smooth. Also, it's a little uneven. So I'm going to go back in here and kind of... I do like the idea that Clark is a little on the tanner side, just given the fact that his powers are derived from sunlight. Whereas Bruce should be less so, what with him being creature of the night and everything. I will admit that's darker than I'd probably want him to be, but this whole illustration skewing a little bit darker than I anticipated. And that's fine. You know, it's all a learning process. I don't think it looks awful. You know, just things I'd probably do a little bit different next time. A little blue to kind of render some volume to his teeth. And then finally, you know what, let me go grab something real quick. Because Clark is mainly reds and blues, for a background, going with like a really primary yellow to make him pop is kind of where you want to be. Yeah, Ashley's been a complete superstar. I feel bad that she's had to be so responsible for Niles while I've been doing so much streaming lately. The problem with doing large areas in this yellow is like super transparent. So it'll be really, it starts to create seams pretty quickly. As you can kind of, I'm not sure how much it shows up on camera, but you can start to kind of see the strokes, as it were, really, really fast. Oops. And there we have it, guys. A complete finished Clark illustration from start to finish, including Copics. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate all the kind words. Yeah, the yellow really helps him pop. That's just kind of color theory type stuff. Um, because of the reds and the blues and the way that the primary colors work with each other, it's usually a good idea to use the one kind of like not featured. Arts and crafts, thank you. I really appreciate that. So yeah, this is going to end up being made available at some point. I'm not sure quite when. I'll probably do like a decent sized kind of like art dump within the next week or two to give people an opportunity to get stuff maybe in time for the holidays, things like that. in the meantime, I did post all the warm-up drawings on my online store, yalestewart.bigcartel.com. That would be these. You got Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, another Clark, Barry, Flash, and then lastly a Batman. And those are on the more affordable end of the spectrum. I like to have them available as kind of cheap alternatives to fancier pieces like this or full pages, etc., etc. And those are all the drawings I did on stream throughout the course of the week, including like they're even listed both by character and by date. So, you know, I mean, maybe if it's a thing where it's like, oh, that was my friend's birthday, it's cool to know that this was drawn on his birthday or something. So there's that. Today is also the final day of my JL8 JSA Worlds Collide print, which is the largest print I've ever done, at both in terms of size and character count. It is 17.5 by 22.5 inches. It is also available on my online store. The listing ends tonight, or when it sells out, whichever comes first. Last time I checked, I think there are only 4 remaining. So if you're interested in it, I highly suggest that you get it. Also, since we're talking about Clark, I'm not gonna lie, this right here is one of my favorite things I've literally ever done. I think it came out really, really well. Just the whole Earth 2 Clark and JL8 Clark. But yeah, so for anybody who might be new here, I try to stream Monday through Friday. Possibly also going to make Saturdays habitual. Really what I do is I stream my work process while I just work on comic pages and commissions, all kinds of stuff. For example, yesterday, I was working on inking this page from my creator-owned project called Forward the Horizon. We got pretty much anything that's black on the page is what we got done yesterday. And then yesterday evening, I did this Nightwing commission in its entirety on stream, in case that's something that you'd like to tune in to see. Generally, I stream from about 1:30 to 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. I'm still kind of like figuring that out because I'm very new at this. I anticipate I'll stick to that schedule for the most part. There might be like another hour or two a day in there somewhere, like later in the evening or earlier in the day. But yeah, be sure to come back by. I start off every stream with a warm-up sketch, which is like those head sketches I just showed. So at least you get to see one thing get completed in a straight shot. Because most everything else I'm working on is going to require multiple days to get done. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all the spiel I have left. If anybody has any like questions or comments or anything, I'm happy to hang out for a little while and talk to you guys. Usually it's kind of difficult for me to engage with chat super regularly while I work because art's pretty focused on the page. So, well, sounds like Niles is home and not tired out, but that's okay. I'm gonna go spend some time with him when we get off stream. But yeah, thank you again so much to everybody who's come out and hung out during this session. It was a lot of fun. I hope that you all enjoyed it. I'll try to, next time I do it, I'll probably go with Diana, Wonder Woman, as the next subject of illustration. And you know what? I'm looking at this and I'm not super thrilled. I'm gonna touch that up a smidge. There we go. It was looking a little jagged. That way it looks a little more round. We actually knocked this out in fairly record time too. This time this only took about 2.5 hours as opposed to the Batman, which took like 3 something. Color a headshot. Well, I can't color any of the headshots. They're already listed for sale. Do a new one? I'm tired. That was a lot of work. All right. Well, I mean, if you wanna order sushi or something for dinner tonight. Do you guys really want to watch me? Well, also, I only have so many colors. Like, I would basically have to either do a headshot of Clark or Bruce. Although I guess given the colors I have, I could maybe kind of finagle a Barry. Here, I'll color this Bruce. Let me tape it down. All right, there, I colored it. Wasn't that fun? I'm glad that people are enjoying my silly little gimmick. You ran a poll and voted in it yourself? Oh. Well, at least you have some dignity. Maybe next weekend, next Saturday. Yeah, next Saturday is the 12th, not Christmas. I do know that there was interest in doing like a draw along stream. Maybe I'll do that next weekend. Maybe I'll post like on the Facebook page and stuff. Kind of see. I imagine it will be Batman, but maybe people kind of wondering how to draw Bruce or something. I don't know. I mean, like I feel like I already kind of go through it pretty step by step, but you know, a little bit more intentional. You know, the more I look at it, I am pretty happy with how this Clark came out. One thing I do need to get some kind of like really, really, really light color to color the whites in. That's something that it's kind of like a weird trick, but usually you want to reserve the like white strictly for highlights and color the non-highlight whites like the lightest shade of blue or maybe yellow because of the skin tone, etc., etc. Because even people with like really white teeth, their teeth aren't actually like the brightest thing about them, right? Not that I think Clark looks bad, um, but it just kind of helps add some dimensionality. Well, yeah, I mean, it's not it's not about the fact that his teeth don't get yellow and like decayed. It's just how color plays off of other surfaces. But anyway, on that note, I think I'm gonna head on out of here. I kind of need to use the restroom. I could use a good stretch. It's still light out, so I wouldn't mind getting some sunshine. But again, thank you so much to everybody who came by. I really appreciate your company. Hopefully, I see some of you again on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever. You can find my schedule in my channel information. Uh, Links to my store in the commands, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I hope everybody has a great rest of the weekend, and hopefully I will see you all later. Take care, everybody.